Hello and welcome to this week's Opening Bell. I'm Boxing News editor Tris Dixon and I'm joined this week by Matt Christie. As always, Matt, how are things going?
They're going well. It's getting hectic, isn't it, as Saturday approaches?
Well, do you know what? Things were hectic at the end of last week, which is why we didn't deliver on our promise of a second podcast.
True.
Well, we actually did deliver on our promise of a second podcast, didn't we? It just didn't get broadcast.
Yeah, and I could tell you some of the things that were said in that, but it's just going to be like I'm telling fibs.
Well, yeah, because we thought Harry Mars would win prize fighter. He didn't. Or we thought he was worth an outside bet.
Yeah.
A cheeky fiver, if you will.
Yeah.
And we talked about Matisse, and I think that was your biggest regret, wasn't it? Because you said the smart money on Matisse, or the best price, was for him to win within 4 rounds.
Yeah, I did say that.
And
I'm glad you're a witness to it.
Well, I do have a selective memory, and that's one of the things I chose to remember. I think we also got it right. I think I said about Lee Purdy that he'd lose in 6 or 7 rounds. So if you guys were listening to awesome bets, I'm sorry, but you lost a fortune. But still, so there's plenty to talk about this week. We can catch up on the Atlantic City show, but I think we should get started on the big show that's this weekend at the O2 Arena in London, which is headlined by Carl Froch in a rematch with Mikael Kessler. Also features George Groves against Noe Gonzalez Alcoba, and Tony Bellew's got his rematch against Isaac Chilemba. Which one should we start with?
Should we get Bellew? Start with Bellew quickly.
Yeah,
do that.
Let's go into Bellew. I mean, he fought Chilemba a couple of months ago. Quick rematch. Neither fighter was satisfied by the outcome, which was a draw. It was actually on a fight on a build where there were 2 draws with Crawler and Derry Matthews. Bellew talked such a big fight beforehand. Really gave it the big one like he does. And he'd be the first to admit he didn't follow through on those boasts. Chilemba, as the away fighter, thinks that he deserved to win. It's one of those where you often hear the catchphrase, you've got to knock them out to win in their backyard. It wasn't as blatant as that. It was a close fight. It was a scrappy fight. In fact, I spoke to Tony yesterday and on a video that you can see on our website, and I asked him if his hands were okay, and he said, yeah, because I didn't hit him all night. And I think that was a fair assessment. It was just a messy, mauling sort of a fight, really, and there were high hopes for it because Tony talks the talk. But he didn't back it up that time. What do you see on Saturday at the O2 between Bellew and Chilemba?
I think Tony will really know he's up against it. I mean, there's been a lot of chat from the Chilemba camp, and I spoke to both Isaac and Buddy McGirt yesterday, and they're both very, very confident. They said Isaac went into the last one with an illness. They think that will be the difference this time, as long as he stays illness-free. And he's clearly got a style that would frustrate the vast majority of light heavyweights. Tony, as he said, he's got to land punches this time. He's really got to go for it. But one of the interesting things I asked Buddy McGirt yesterday was because immediately Tony, after the decision was announced, he was furious. He was on Sky Television saying, "Well, even Buddy McGirt said I won it. Even Buddy McGirt said I won it." Now Buddy McGirt is denying that. He admits there was a conversation took place. He admits that he thought a draw was a fair result. But he said he couldn't really hear what Tony was saying, and he certainly didn't say that he thought Tony won the first encounter. And he's very confident that his charge will win this one.
Okay, that's interesting insight about that Bellew-McGirt exchange. Having spoken to Tony, not only yesterday, but I spoke to him on the phone over the weekend as I wrote the preview for the magazine and for the app. What was interesting about Tony is he has a point to prove, but now he has that point to prove. It's not the point. Isn't the point he wants to make? Isn't that he can be exciting? The point he wants to prove is that he can win the fight. And we've seen Tony in a couple of dull fights, I suppose you'd say. The Overall Mackenzie rematch, which he dominated, the Chilemba fight, maybe 1 or 2 others here or there where he's played it safe. And I mean, it's hard to criticise someone whose game plan is to win, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think there were times in that first fight where he was boiling over. Early on, he was dragged away from Chilemba because he fights with such passion, doesn't he, Tony? But yeah, he learned his lesson. I think something to remember going into this fight is he went life and death with Ovill Mackenzie in that first fight. And there were times where he looked like, with the Watts, there was a point in the second round where he took that shot and he looked like he was out cold until he woke up when he hit the canvas. So he clearly learned his lessons from that one, and from Tony's point of view, let's hope he's learnt them from the first Chilembe fight, and he can adapt. Whether Chilembe can get any better, well, I think Tony can improve on that, but can Chilembe?
Well, I mean, if he was ill going into the fight, and you think he might have a bit more in the tank this time, and he finished the stronger of the two last time. Styles make fights. Will these two ever have a good fight? I mean, it's not really a Gatti Ward style mix, is it? Let's be frank.
No, I think it will be a pretty sharp contrast to the main event, which as fights go, you can almost guarantee that it's going to be exciting, however long it lasts. I don't think Bellew Chilembe will be a wonderful spectacle, but it's still interesting to see, because you don't know who the winner's going to be, and boxing is interesting when you've got fights like that. But I can't imagine it'll be any worse than the first fight.
Bellew's a narrow favourite on all fronts with all the websites and all the betting agents. I think 4 to 7 on is about the best price you can get, whereas Chilembe, the best price I think is about 13 to 8. Which is with our new sponsors, actually, William Hill. Chilembe at 13 to 8. It's not a bad punt, is it?
No, Chilembe very much a live underdog. It wouldn't surprise me to see him win this contest. If you're 13 to 8, though, you need to have fairly hefty stake to really be celebrating too wildly at the end of the fight.
Well, I think that's the most popular bet. According to Oddschecker, Chilembe 13 to 8 to win is the most popular bet, with sort of more than 50% of the bets on the fight going on that.
Yeah.
Only a very, very small margin, maybe 5%, according to Oddschecker. People going for the draw, 25 to 1. Now, I know that there's a sort of running joke about draws, but that's not bad, is it? I mean, 25 to 1.
No, I'm just trying to think of an example in boxing where we've had two consecutive draws, and one doesn't spring to mind. I'm sure it's happened, but I can't think of an example.
Yeah, I think you'd be hard pushed, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
like you say, nothing springs to mind. There's certainly a few fights that could have gone either way. And could have been draws. You think of the first couple of Barrera and Morales fights could have been draws, but it's not the way it worked out. So I mean, it would be a massive difference, wouldn't it? Something very unusual for him. 2.5% of bets are going on that 25 to 1 draw.
Yeah.
So it's only a small amount. And one thing, before we're not trying to get too far ahead of ourselves, we had mentioned that Froch Kessler a few weeks ago was not a bad bet for the draw. So if Bellew and Chilembe was another draw, it could feasibly feature on another bill with 2 draws.
Again, that certainly would be unheard of, I'm sure. Particularly with the speed as well that this Chilembe-Bellew rematch has been arranged, and for 2 huge bills to finish with 2 draws would be astonishing.
So where's your money going? I mean, not if you've got to place a bet, but who's going to win and why?
I think Bellew can improve on that first performance. He's exceptionally driven. I'm sure he's gone back and he's studied that first fight. He's seen where he's gone wrong. I don't wish to write Chilembe off completely, but I think Bellew can win, and I think it'll be a tight fight again. Perhaps it could go either way, but I think Bellew will get the decision this time.
Yeah, I sort of agree with you. I think it will be scrappy again. I think it will be close again. I think Bellew might pace himself a little bit better this time. Maybe not try to be so exciting as was the case in the Ovill Mackenzie fights. And obviously I say that knowing full well that Bellew wasn't exciting last time, but no one knows that more than him. Yeah. Because obviously the higher you talk yourself up, the harder you come crashing down when you don't live up to those expectations. Yeah. In fact, there was a fight, I was just talking about it with Ricky Hatton the other day actually, and everyone talks about how fanatical his fan base was, and I can't remember which fight it was. I think it was before he was a WBU champ. It was around that early stage sort of British WBU championship, and everyone remembers the Hatton days with such great affection. But when Ricky was on fire and banging everyone out to the body and looking really exciting, there was a fight with, I think it might have even, I'm not sure if it was a Journey, but someone who was not spectacular. And after sort of 2 or 3 rounds, Ricky's body shots weren't landing, and the crowd started booing. And that's the problem, isn't it? When you have these massive expectations, anything less than that, and the crowd can turn, can't it?
Yeah, and it might help Tony actually. I know it's going to be a huge expectant crowd, but let's face it, the majority are there to see the main event. It's not in Liverpool, so some of the pressure may be off his shoulders a little bit. And he was, by his standards, by some of his press conference standards, he was quite subdued yesterday, wasn't he? I'm not saying he wasn't determined. You could see that fire in his eyes, but he was quite subdued. And
well, it's funny you should mention that. It was one of the things we talked about actually last weekend. Was about how he's talked up the fights and how this time he didn't want to get involved in anything like that, and so he was very matter of fact yesterday, wasn't he? He chucked out a couple of really sort of average sound bites.
Yeah.
You know, just I'm here to do a job.
Yeah.
Let's get ready and all the rest of it. But and you know, he said that was how he's going to be. And normally he would be dragged into slagging matches or really trying to hype the fight. I think maybe that's something that you allude to, really, where he's not top of the bill. It's not really his bill to sell. You know, that's obviously come down to Froch and Kessler.
Yeah.
So okay, well yeah, I agree with you. I think Bellew narrowly on points will get that, and I don't expect fireworks, although we'd like them obviously. Okay, so I think that fight is going to kick off the Sky broadcast at around about 8 o'clock when they go pay-per-view on Box Office, and the second fight on the bill will be George Groves against Noe Gonzalez Alcoba. Groves and Froch have exchanged words via the media this week. They've obviously exchanged punches in the sparring ring before, and Groves has been away helping Mikkel Kessler prepare in Denmark. So there's a sort of added storyline in here, but Groves can't afford to slip up.
No, I think the Groves has, for me, steadily improved. I think from when he fought, he's coming along nicely. Then he fought Kenny Anderson. He had that stumble round 2 or 3, but let's remember he came back to win that. But since then, as is very often the case with an unbeaten fighter who's shown that kind of vulnerability in every fight that he has now, there's kind of this question mark over his chin, and he's going in with a guy who's a decent puncher. So yeah, it's interesting, but if Groves can't get past this guy and win fairly impressively, then he has no business at world level.
Yeah, well, I mean, Alcoba's 2 losses have come up world level on points to Felix Sturm several years ago, and he got bombed out by Adonis Stevenson, which is it's hard to read too much into that because Stevenson is a big banger.
Oh yeah.
But like you say, I mean, if Sturm and Stevenson have done it, and Groves wants to be mixing in those levels, then he needs to follow suit. He's a massive favourite, 25-1 on to win this, according to the Popular Bets via Odds Checker. With Gonzalez, a big 12-1 outsider. I think what you alluded to with Kenny Anderson is interesting because he's Alcoba can punch, and Groves can get drawn off the beaten track. You know, in terms of he does get involved when he doesn't always need to. He had that exciting fight in America last year where he got quite badly cut, taking risks he didn't need to. And this is a guy who's a strong puncher when in close with the right hand and the left hook. But his dimension should be suited to Groves. He's shorter, he's stockier, and Groves should be able to use his boxing and keep on the outside and outbox him.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, but you mentioned those fights with Groves, even the Paul Smith fight where he looked exceptional in the second round. The way he finished Paul Smith off was the mark of a very, very talented fighter. But at the end of the first round, he got caught quite heavily and he looked unsteady, and it was almost a feeling that he'd been saved by the bell at the end of that, and that was kind of forgotten because of the emphatic nature of the finish in the next session. But yeah, still those question marks over George Groves, and fighters don't really, even if they don't ever really go away. Once you've shown that vulnerability, unfairly or not, those question marks never really go away.
I think Groves does, to tick another box, as it were, through this fight. I think he could do with boxing 2 instructions by Adam Booth, boxing a nice disciplined fight, sticking to the game plan, which I'm sure will be to try and box from range, not getting too close, not get involved, obviously throw his punches and move off and out of range. Kind of to bring in Hatton again, kind of like the performance he delivered against Benteke, where he sort of outboxed him, didn't take too many risks. There was no point.
Yeah.
And if the knockout comes, it comes. Obviously, it didn't for Hatton against Taki, but it could come for Groves this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I've quite fancy Groves might be able to pull out the stoppage. Gonzalez yesterday said he's been in training camp and he's taking this fight very seriously. He's been there, what did he say, 6-7 weeks? So he's really, he's up for this one.
6.5 weeks, didn't he?
Did he? Is that what he said? Well, that's pretty specifics. But yeah, no. So Gonzalez certainly hasn't come over just to lie down. I mean, if he was to win this fight, he's right back in the world mix as well. So, it's all to play for.
Yeah. So we're coming up to the main event. It's quite an exciting fight, don't you think?
Yeah. One or two things been mentioned.
So I mean, obviously we've gone to town in the issue with it this week. We've got obviously a Froch Kessler front, which is brilliantly designed by our designer Nick Bond. So it's sort of implies the 50-50 nature of the fight.
Yeah.
We've got Donald McRae, who's been and interviewed Mikael Kessler for us. And Matt, you've spoken to Carl Froch. I've spoken to both in the build-up to the fight. And we've got key views from some of the major people in the division, including Arthur Abraham, Robert Stieglitz, Brian McGee, Glenn Johnson, former great Steve Collins, James DeGale, Anthony Mundine, Adonis Stevenson and Richie Woodall. And we've got views from both camps, from sparring partners Tony Bellew, who's helped Froch, and Groves, who's been with Kessler. We've got some of your comments from Twitter and Facebook in there as well. And Danny Flexen's also spoken to Andre Ward for the expert view for the preview. So we're fully covered and extremely comprehensive stuff. There's more on our website as well in the Fight Focus section, which has got all you need to know about the big fight there too. It's packed. And it's fair to say it's packed because not only are we excited about this fight, but the nation's excited about the fight, isn't it?
It really is, yeah. It's in all the papers today, isn't it? I mean, some perhaps slightly ill thought out comments from Carl have made the national papers today. But yeah, it certainly will be the biggest fight in the country this year, and it's nice to see. It's nice to see that boxing is getting some attention, and it's a fight where, I mean, perhaps with previous fights that spring to mind, the whole build up to Chisora was perhaps shrouded in controversy and a little bit unsavoury. Prior to that, Hay Klitschko, Hay Harrison, those two fights, you were not convinced as a boxing journalist or whatever that they would actually produce the goods. This one, Kessler Froch, it would be an astonishment, wouldn't it, if it wasn't a very, very exciting fight.
Do you know, I hate to say it, but there's a nagging doubt that I have about the fight, and that is that Kessler is too far over the hill, and he's not the same fighter he was 3 years ago. And I mean, I'll put this to the back in a minute, but I do think there's an element there that I could see Froch jumping on him the same way he did with Bute, but I think Kessler's more durable and rugged than Bute.
Yeah.
But I could see Froch stopping him in 6 or 7 rounds. And I think Kessler could be shell-shocked and hurt. I don't think that's going to go. That's not where I'd put my money, but I could see that happening. And if that happened, I think that wouldn't be great for boxing.
I'm not sure. I mean, I think even if that happened, and it's certainly not out of the question. It's crossed my mind this week when went to the Mikael Kessler Open training session on Tuesday or Wednesday. I'm not sure. Tuesday. And certainly he looked when he came walking in, he looked quite haggard. Looks like maybe getting down in weight has been a real struggle for him.
Some of the other journalists yesterday were saying that he was looking drawn.
Yeah, but I think that he has got that warrior within. I'm not saying Lucien Bute didn't, but like you say, he is more durable. And if Froch does win convincingly after 6 or 7 rounds, I don't think he's going to have the feel of a mismatch. I think Kessler will go down fighting. He'll certainly let Carl know that he's there. So no, it may not be the seesaw battle that the first one was, but I think that whatever happens, it's going to be exciting to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and I mean, ultimately, I do have that. You know, that's my reservation. What I
Yeah.
said was my reservation. You know, as a boxing journalist, I think it will be a really good fight. I think Froch has improved. I do think Kessler's regressed a little.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't think Alan Green would have put over the Kessler who fought Calzaghe, or maybe even the Kessler that fought Froch in the first place. And I know Alan Green's a puncher, but he's always been soundly beaten by the very best. And so I think it will be a good fight. I was speaking to Rob McCracken yesterday, who, when I mentioned that, you know, about my concerns about Kessler not being the same force, he basically said, "Well, wouldn't that be nice?" And it probably would be. But he also mentioned how Kessler's body attack affected Carl last time. And I remember after the fight in Herning, I spoke to Carl just before he went to the day at the press conference, post-fight, and even then he was chomping at the bit for a rematch. But he was saying that the body shots had you know, he hadn't felt shots like that, and obviously we've seen Kessler bang out Brian McGee to the body in his last fight, so they're going to be very wary about that. I think tactically it's an intriguing fight. I mean, one of Kessler's best punches is his right hand, and we know that Carl likes to carry his left low. Carl's dangerous when he gets his left hook going, and Kessler sometimes drops his right hand, which is unusual for a fighter, because normally it's the left that, you know, fighters will snake out, but Kessler, you know, he does keep his right cocked here, ready to, I think, to deliver it short to the body or to the head, and it's not often he keeps up here consistently. I think Froch's best shot is his uppercut, and I'm not sure that's going to be massively effective, certainly his right uppercut against Kessler, because when you throw the uppercut, you leave yourself open, and I'm not sure he's going to be prepared to take that kind of gamble with Kessler. But I think it will be exciting. What happened? I've seen the last fight a couple of times in the build-up, and it still doesn't transmit the same way it did being there in person. I mean, it was a mind-blowing spectacle being there in person. I mean, you could hear the punches really thudding into the body, and off the head, it was something that was visceral. And, you know, the people who were there said that the TV didn't do it justice. And that's no criticism to TV. That's just how it was. And I think there was something similar said about the Lucas Matisse fight over the weekend. But the shots, I mean, the stunning thing about Kessler and Froch was that they stood up to those shots time and again. Shots that would have put over, 95% of the people in the division, and maybe even finished them. So astonishing capabilities and possibilities with this fight. Are you certain it will catch fire at some point? And do you think if it does, it will be sooner rather than later? Because last time, it's easy. It sort of built as it went along. It got sort of more and more wild as it went along. So how do you see this one unfolding?
Well, I'm not certain it will catch fire. But I mean, going back to what you were saying about the Lucien Boutte fight, there were times in those first 2 rounds, even though kind of we look back on that and it's people's kind of memory of it is that Carl Froch thrashed Lucien Boutte. I remember being there in those first couple of rounds, and Froch walked through some real nasty shots. He was taking some shots. If Boutte, I'm saying, those punches that Froch reined in were some of the finish was like horror shots, weren't they? They were, they'd have done damage to anybody. But if that's Kessler and they get into that kind of firefight, I don't think that Kessler will back down as easily. And I think if Froch goes in with that attitude, and a lot of people I've heard a lot of opinion this week where people say, well, I think Froch is going to walk right through him. I think if he goes in, and he seems he's so angry, Carl, as well, so prickly, so determined that he can barely contain himself. There is a danger that Kessler could have his moments early on, but I think ultimately he's going to be. I think that Froch is going to stop him. I agree with pretty much everything you've said. Kessler has regressed, and what Robert McCracken said yesterday, in that Kessler's only fought 13 rounds against comparatively poor opposition to what Carl's been in with. It's not preparation for a fight of this magnitude, even if he's walked through them. It's not preparation.
With Kessler and Rose, good preparation.
Yeah, good preparation, but sparring isn't like being in there like Carl's been in there, is it? But Groves, yeah, I'm sure it is good preparation. There's also been noises that Cleverly has kind of had his way with Mikel in sparring we hear these kind of things with a lot of camps, don't we? You can't really take too much from that and kind of base a prediction on the fight on what you hear about training camps or what you hear about sparring. Mikel will be as good as he possibly can be at this point in time. He will have prepared as well as he possibly could have. He won't have cut any corners. But I do think what he's been through the last few years in terms of those easier fights and against the slightly weaker the weaker opposition than what Carlos faced will be telling. And he looked like he was slowing anyway.
It does make you wonder, really, if all of the questions about Kessler, which he's faced, because I've heard them countless times over the last few weeks. Have you been the same since your eye injury? Are you getting older? Have you had too many hard fights? How will the inactivity affect you on the night? Is Froch massively improving, and is he a better fighter? I mean, those are all questions that Kessler will have turning in his head. Yeah. And McCracken was quite, Rob McCracken's good at his mind games. I give him a lot of credit for that. I mean, Rob's good at most things that he does.
Yeah, he is.
But he's particularly good at mind games. And when he was saying about the inactivity yesterday, Kessler bit almost straight away and said, "Well, no, I haven't been." And it's just plants another seed, and that's all it does. And so Kessler, I think the thing with Kessler, what interests me, and I've just put this in the staff prediction actually for the website, or words to the effect, is fighters like Kessler, really, really good fighters, top fighters, they will have been around the block, fought everywhere, and he's fought in 5 or 6 different countries. They generally have one big performance left in them, and Kessler might have that one fight left in him.
Yeah, it's true. It's a good point.
And he might be able to turn the clock back to an extent and have one last hurrah where it will be spectacular and amazing, and it might not be enough to win, but it might turn the clock back.
Yeah.
So let me leave you with that thought as we have a word from our sponsors.
William Hill, sponsors of the Opening Bell podcast. Bet £25 and get a £25 bet free. Froch v Kessler. Bet now with WilliamHill.com. Hi
and welcome back to the Opening Bell. Matt, we're getting to the time where you've almost got to put your money where your mouth is, but you've spoken to a couple of special guests this week. Who have you spoken to, and where have they said about putting their cheeky fivers?
Well, we'll play in a second what they both said, but actually spoke to a guy named Mikel Kessler, who was training at the Haymaker Gym in Vauxhall, and he was kind enough to give me his prediction. And I spoke to Carl Froch yesterday, and he seemed to quite enjoy the cheeky fiver question. And I spoke to him at the press conference yesterday.
So moving forward, it's something we might be putting to more fighters. But yeah, this is what they've had to say this week about what's going to happen on Saturday night and where you should put your cheeky fiver.
Yeah, there's a lot of bets flying about. There's obviously that they were saying, William Hill was saying this is going to be the most anticipated fight in terms of bets being put on since I think Hey Klitschko. If you're a betting man and you had a cheeky fiver, obviously you're going to lay it on yourself. But you got like rounds 9 to 12, rounds 1 to 4. Where would you put that cheeky fiver?
I've looked at the odds late on. I'm quite surprised the good odds you can get for picking a round late on. It's like 15s and 20s and 25s for round 9, 10, 11 and 12. So it's almost like they're ruling out a late stoppage, but I don't know how they can rule out a late stoppage because I always finish strong. And Mikel Kessler falls apart late on. In that first fight, he was coming undone. I wasn't able to do anything about it because I wasn't myself in that first fight. I know the reason why I wasn't myself, and that's not the same this time around. So I feel I can force a late stoppage. So if I had a cheeky fiver, I'd have it on the last 4 rounds, definitely, and I'd get a good return on that.
Yeah. If you're a betting man, what would be your prediction on the fight? Where would you put your cheeky fiver?
On myself, of course. Hey, on Carl in the 3rd round. Come on.
Okay, so I think that was rather tongue-in-cheek, possibly, from Mikel Kessler. You'd certainly like to think so. Hopefully he hasn't got his cheeky fiver on being chinned in 3 rounds.
But it's, you know what? It's funny you should say that. I've had emails from our sponsor William Hill this morning, and the video of that went up on our website yesterday with Kessler saying that he would put his money on Carl Froch in 3 rounds, and yes, definitely it was a tongue-in-cheek statement. But the odds at the start of the week for Carl Froch, rounds 1 to 3 was 16 to 1. Now they're only 11 to 1, so I don't know if people are taking Mikel to his word.
Blimey.
But so the odds are dropping for Froch to literally come out and walk right through Kessler.
I mean, it's something that you shouted about, I think, a few weeks ago when I think it was pretty much 28 to 1 everywhere, the draw. I mean, it's going to be hard for Kessler to get any kind of decision over here against a guy who fights like Carl. And not just that, but he's fighting the hometown crowd as well, or hometown, London, the home country crowd.
Yeah, it is. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult. I did mention the draw. I would be surprised now, but a draw is always good value, and they're not. Well, maybe it's because we've had a few draws lately, but they're not as rare as odds often suggest. And
not bad to cover yourself, is it?
No, exactly. It's like if you're playing pontoon and you not pontoon roulette and you stick it on green 0, isn't it?
Is that right, Matt?
I don't know. Well, so
you'll be going back to Vegas for boxing news anytime soon. We need to double check those expenses.
You don't need to. I always win.
Will you ever pay any of it back?
But but with William Hill, the draw is 18 to 1. They've got the draw at
18 to 1. Yeah.
Yeah, but Carl Froch's cheeky fiver. His rounds 10 to 12. The last few rounds is only 11 to 8. So that is Carl has actually picked out the favourite bet when you're kind of doing it round by round.
I think people get their hopes up for a stoppage win, don't they? Because they like the drama, the electricity it produces. Yeah. So I think people sometimes vote with their hearts, not their heads. I'm not saying that you can't make a case for that, because you can. You can make a very solid case for that.
Yeah.
But I think, say the man in the street will think, oh yeah, Froch, he was dominant against Lucian Boot. He's been chinning everyone. Look at him against Youssef Mack. He's in the form of his life. He's, no one's going to stop him.
Yeah.
So I think that people will have that, people away from the direct boxing circles might well be thinking along those lines, and that Kessler is obviously a quality opponent, so he should be good for a few rounds before Carl finishes him off. I mean, you can understand that thinking, can't you?
Yeah, you can absolutely. However, I did make a mistake, and it's actually 11 to 8 for Carl Froch to win on points. For rounds 10 to 12, it's 10 to 1.
Wow, 10 to 1.
That's so his cheeky fiver.
Mistake.
Yeah, his cheeky fiver would actually come in with 50 notes.
Okay, interesting. I'm not sure 50 notes will affect him too much in the grand scheme of things.
Well, no, probably not.
But then he's earned it the hard way, because I remember there was years and years ago, I think this is even before you joined Boxing News, and I was writing blogs campaigning almost for him to get on mainstream television, because he was involved in several thrillers, and unfortunately after the ITV deal went pear-shaped with Mick Hennessy, he found himself in something of a TV wilderness, and it was really unfortunate that someone who had sort of come up such a legitimate way, British, Commonwealth, European champion, WBC champion, had made it all the way to the top of the pile. He'd been on BBC, he'd been on Sky, been on ITV, got right to the top, and then there was nowhere for him to go. And it's the complete opposite of how it should go. You should get more and more interest as you go up. And Carl was in a really unfortunate situation where he built his way up and then was almost dropped off at the end. And it was very difficult for everyone involved, and it wasn't great for boxing, because his big fights really went by under the radar.
Yeah, I remember. I can't remember who was fighting at the time. He was certainly at top level. And I remember saying to a friend who follows sports, I said, he asked if I was going out. I said, no, I'm going to stay in and watch the Carl Froch fight. And there was more or less a response of, who's Carl Froch? I think at the time he was a world champion. And that really brought it home to me, how much he wasn't on the sporting radar and how much he should have been. Because, when British guys get to the level of world champion, they should be household names. They were throughout history. Imagine if Ricky Hatton hadn't had that platform as he was moving up. Really, Carl Froch should be at that kind of level now. Maybe he's never going to take the amount of fans over to Las Vegas as Ricky did, but he should. he should have been at the level he's at now years ago, shouldn't he? In terms of his fame.
Yeah, well, you'd like to think this gauntlet of fights he's been on, it should have really, the fans really should have started coming on board almost directly after the Pascal fight.
Definitely, yeah.
But then it didn't help, and it helped him boxing wise because it got him a lot of respect.
Yeah.
Certainly with Showtime in the USA at the time, and HBO were covering this fight. But when he went away on Showtime and boxed Jermaine Taylor, the thing is, after the Pascal fight, and although there was a lot of interest and intrigue in Froch, it's not great to then make everyone travel to the States in the first fight because you don't build any kind of momentum, do you? And then by the time you're back and fighting in this country, 6 months has gone since the Pascal fight.
Yeah, it's a good point.
So it's been tough on a number of fronts. But then I also think, and this is slightly getting off the beaten track, and I don't want to do that too much, I think there's a lot to be said for fighters sticking on one network and building up that fan base. I mean, you mentioned Ricky Hatton, who was obviously Sky's darling and had all but 2 of his fights, I think, recorded by Sky. And he built up that phenomenal fan base. You think of the guys on ITV back in the early 90s with Ben and Collins and so forth, or Ben and Eubank, who really built their brands through those channels. And then you think of Amir Khan, who hasn't got the same fan base as Ricky Hatton, but people thought he might do once he was the darling of the Athens Olympics and got silver medal at the age of 17. But he's been on, I think off the top of my head, BBC with the Olympics, ITV, Sky Box Office, regular Sky, Primetime, Box Nation. That's 6 networks in a comparatively short career. Well, 6 networks in a how long is it? 9-year career. So that's almost a network every, just a year and a couple of months.
Yeah.
So it doesn't help build that stability, and I think Cole's had a bit of that. But now obviously Sky have been pushing him, and he's been on the same platform for several fights, and it sort of helps build the momentum. So I don't know, maybe that's just me, but I think it does help when you've got that consistency where people know where to find you and where to find your fights. Yeah,
definitely, 100%. And we've said it so many times with the fights that Carl's never backed down from a challenge, and you just feel that he really should be up there with the best 2 or 3 sportsmen in the country for what he's gone out and achieved at the very, very top of his sport.
What do you think's held him back? Do you think it is the lack of coverage, and why do you think he hasn't had the coverage? Is it because of the reasons we mentioned?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I'm not sure if he kind of endeared himself when he kind of burst onto the scene and was harassing Joe Calzaghe, who at that point was a national hero. And people often read Carl the wrong way, but he's nothing if not just a focused, determined athlete. And that's clearly the most important thing in his life is his boxing and reach and getting to the pinnacle. He keeps talking about this fight being for his legacy, and you can understand that. I certainly think even though he's starting to get that level of fame, he should have more.
So the fight starts at about 11:15 UK time in London. You and I will be there ringside. I'll be there covering the main event for the magazine and some of the undercard, and Matt, you'll be doing the same. And we'll also be posting live updates on the website throughout the night, providing the O2's Wi-Fi is working well.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
But I'm sure it will be. Looking forward to it very much, being there, a big occasion. Been to some good fights there, actually. I remember one of the best fights that I've seen there was Khan against Willie Limond, which was a cracker of a fight, very unexpected. I think that was my first show as a staff member for Boxing News, actually. Where Willie Limond rocked and dropped and hurt Amir, and the Marcus McDonnell sort of, had perfectly good reason really to count Amir out, but then Amir showed his heart, and some massive swelling on Willie Limond's jaw, who I saw walking in the bowels of the arena on the way to the press conference afterwards, and that was an astonishing turnaround, a sign of things to come for Amir, very much so. And I was also there for Hey Matt Cronelli when Claude was actually doing TV work in the Setanta box, and I was there with Daniel Herbert. And on that undercard, there was a thriller when Kevin Mitchell and Carl Johansson went toe-to-toe, and that was a belter, wasn't it? Fight.
Yeah.
So hopefully there'll be more of the same, more drama on Saturday night. In fact, I'm not sure if it was the last one I was there for, but De Gale and Groves was there. So I've seen Groves box at the O2 before. So there was plenty of thrills and spills that night. Were you there, De Gale and Groves?
No, I wasn't.
Okay. So Froch Kessler, Matt, time to put your money where your mouth is. How's it going to end up, and why?
Right, was this what bet I'd put on? Is it?
No.
No. I think Froch will stop him. I think Froch will stop him in around 9 or 10 rounds. I think Kessler will be. I think he'll start to. I think it will be pretty violent pretty early. From about the second or third round, I will say it'll start to get quite heated two-way action. But I think that Carl's portion of that two-way action will outweigh Mikel's, and he'll just start to take over and perhaps break Mikel's will a little bit as the fight goes on. He's going to be aware of the injuries that he's had and the problems that he's had. You mentioned earlier the question marks in his mind. Even the strongest willed characters find it hard to ignore those question marks in their mind. And I think he'll stop him in round 9 or 10.
Okay. I think one thing we haven't factored into the equation is last time Carl's nose went and he had a horrible cut on his nose that he said squirted into his eyes and what have you. Kessler had that horrible jagged cut as well over, I think it was his left eye. I mean, cuts could be an issue, couldn't it, with the type of punches they throw, and you know they've both eaten a lot of leather over the years, so the skin could break. I mean, there's a lot of things that could happen in that fight, but that's well worth taking into consideration. And cuts. Yeah,
and I think going back to what you said earlier when you were saying, you fear that it may not produce what many hope it will and what many expect it to in terms of drama. If there's a cut eye in the first or second round, that can very, very quickly ruin a night, can't it?
It certainly can. So, as I mentioned earlier, there's loads of Froch Kessler coverage in the magazine this week. There's stacks of it online as well through the Fight Focus section. Everything you need to know, including start times of TV broadcasts, tail of the tapes, interviews with both guys. We actually interviewed stacks of guys yesterday, including Bellew, Chilemba, Michael Buffer, the ring announcer, who we got a feature on in next week's magazine. So there's plenty of Froch Kessler content for you to look at over the next few days, leading into the fight and after the fight, as we'll probably speak to the guys on the night as well. Matt, I just wanted to go back in time just briefly, because we do recaps. It almost feels like we've done the main event now before. And this is the sort of 4 or 6 round show closer, doesn't it? As everyone's sort of filtering out of the arena.
I'm feeling a bit tired.
Which is a feeling we know all too well. You know, when we sort of turn the lights off as we leave the venue.
Yeah,
for
but
boxing news.
people often don't think. You know, they get involved, they enjoy the main event, and although it might sound, like we're being a bit ungrateful for the the very.
Privileged position.
Privilege was the word I was looking for. Very privileged position we are, but sometimes when the main event may not finish till 11:30, 12, and then you glance down at the run order, you've already been there since like 4:30, 5, and there's another 4 fights to go, and then certainly not of the same quality as the main event, and it can be very, very tiresome, can't it, when you get that kind of scenario.
Well, I remember the worst example I had of that, and people listening or watching might not know, but I lived down in Salisbury in Wiltshire, and I went up to cover Nigel Wright against Jose Olusegun up near Newcastle. What's the name of that place?
Peter Lee.
Oh
gosh.
And it was one of my very early gigs as a staffer for Boxing News, and I tend not to stay at hotels. It's not that I have an issue with them, but I just drive up to the venue and drive back that night. And whether it's Manchester or Birmingham, wherever, I just drive back the night of the fight. That's just how I've always done it. And I drove up to Peterlee, and it was a Friday. It was when Sky had Friday night fight or Friday fight night, and it was Nigel Wright Olusegun, Frank Maloney promoting. I think I left at about 9 o'clock in the morning. It was about a 6-hour drive up there, but the traffic was horrific. It was sort of a 7 or 8 hour drive because it was Friday afternoon, so you can imagine I hit Birmingham at lunchtime, I hit Manchester when people were knocking off work, and by the time I got up to Peterlee, I was literally just walking through the door when the first bell rang. So it was a nightmare. And then you watch the undercard, and then I think Sky's main event was about 10 o'clock, and Olusegun Wright, which wasn't a bad fight, went to points was a long fight. It was, you know, it went the duration 12 rounds. I think Usyk retained the Commonwealth title. And then you look at it and you think, well, hang on, this venue's going to have a curfew. We're getting on for midnight now. And there were 3 8-rounders left. And there was no venue curfew. And all of those fights came and went. And I remember Gerd Ajetovic fought, and, you know, everyone was saying that it was going to be exciting and stuff. And it was the most tepid 8-rounder I think I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, how am I going to survive the drive back? But you know, the fights came and went, and I drove home, and I think I got back at about 6 or 7 o'clock. So I'd been on the go for a long time, and it does get tough, doesn't it? It does get tough, and people will think that. I mean, when you go to the big fights in Vegas as well, it's slightly different in that you do finish early. But I think some people don't understand that the undercards can sometimes start at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Yeah. And if you think, and I mean, I'm not trying to make it sound horrific, because it's not. You know, I know that there's plenty worse jobs out, but in terms of proper elbow work, it's very, very difficult out there, because you do need to be constantly on your ball. You're constantly working on the trips. You really live the fight, which is part of the job, which is fantastic. But you do start at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, having prepped all the day previously. Generally, there's fights on the Friday night in Vegas as well, so you got to write them up Saturday morning, and then from Saturday you go and analyse the fights, watch the fights from 2, and then the press conference tends to finish about midnight at 1 o'clock. And it's a long old haul, and then you've got to be up early in the morning for your flight back. Yeah. So it can be a little bit relentless. I wonder how the shows, that said, is going to pan out. I know I've had that previous rant about fights being on late at night, and I still don't get it. I still don't get why Froch Kessler is on box office at 11:15 at night. I still don't see how that taps into the mass market, where I can see how it would work hand in hand with the Champions League final as a one-off. I can see that. But I can't see, you know, you would never put X Factor on at 11:15 at night to get the big numbers.
No, I don't know if it's something to do with to make it a little bit better for the American viewers.
But even so, on a regular bill, whether it's Box Nation or Sky, the main event's sort of 10:30, and you know, if you're watching prize fighting, that starts at 9 o'clock. The final's about 11 o'clock, 11:15. So
it's going out on HBO though, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I'm not sure if it's live though.
I'm
not sure. Obviously, they were going to do the double header this week with Jean Pascal and Lucien Bute, which was going to be a great fight. And I spoke to Pascal in Vegas, who was really fired up for the fight this weekend. And then Bute's been injured, and they've had to put the fight back till December or January, which is a real shame, because it would have been a great co-feature. Yeah. So anyway, Matt, as we do this walkout bout now, and we just surmise what happened last weekend in Atlantic City before we have that long drive home. There were two fights of note. I mean, obviously Anthony Ogogo and Haroon Khan had good wins on the undercard. Haroon had a very straightforward win, and then there was Ogogo. But let's start with Lee Purdy's effort against Devon Alexander. I mean, he was apparently, now we know, he was always going to be up against it, trying to make the weight. Yeah. But weight or no weight, he was always going to be bang up against it against someone like Devon Alexander, wasn't he?
Yeah, we said it in the podcast that never was really, didn't we? That Lee was really up against it, but you can't blame him. You can't blame him for taking that fight. So once he probably won't get another fight like that. And you can't blame him. He went in, he gave it a go, and I think it was the right decision by Darren Barker to pull him out, because it was only going to get worse. He was only going to, you know, if it had gone the distance, he'd have lost a lopsided decision. There'd have been more hurt involved. No shame in Lee Purdy's performance. And yeah, Devon Alexander did as was expected.
Yeah, I mean, Devon looked... the word I'd associate with him since the Bradley fight would probably be gun shy. Yeah. He didn't look like that against Purdy, but I think, and I mean this with no malice towards Lee Purdy, but I just don't think he had any respect for Purdy, so he went out and did what he wanted to do, which might have been why he hurt his hand in the second round so early, because Alexander he wasn't taking liberties, but he was doing what he wanted in there, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was, and he, as I said, just went as expected. But Lee Purdy should feel no shame in that. Took the fight fairly short notice for a fight for a world title. Well, should have been a world title fight. He took the fight fairly short notice for a fight of that magnitude, and he did okay. Didn't disgrace himself.
So, but the guy who got the headlines last week in Atlantic City was the Argentine Lucas Matthysse, who blasted out Lamont Peterson in 3 rounds. Now, Peterson's been on the deck before a few times. Seen it myself with Victor Ortiz, or obviously him have his hands full with Amir Khan. But he was wiped out by Lucas Matthysse, wasn't he? I mean, how can you not be impressed by Lucas, who ringside, as I'll say, people like Adam Smith from Sky, who I spoke to yesterday, were mesmerised by his power.
Yeah, we knew he had that. We knew he had that power in him. But he just destroyed Peterson, didn't he? And the fight you mentioned against Ortiz and Khan, and we both spoke about it last week, was that he's a notorious slow starter. He always has been, Lamont Peterson. Matthysse obviously done his homework, was well aware of that. But even so, to beat a guy like Lamont Peterson, who, even though he isn't a slow starter, nothing like that's ever happened before. He's always kind of dug in and fought back and won the fights. He didn't give Peterson a chance. And Matthysse, all of a sudden now, from being a renowned puncher, a renowned exciting fighter, has now just jumped to the top of the these mythical Power Punch League as the most exciting fighter. Matthysse against, I don't know, imagine Matthysse against someone like Adrian Broner or something like that now. I
mean, the interesting thing about Matthysse, if I can just interject there, is a couple of weeks before the fight, he signed a deal with Al Heyman, and massively influential manager in America, who's got the keys to a lot of different kingdoms, including the Floyd Mayweather kingdom. Yeah. And I know that people were saying when I was out there for Mayweather's fight with Guerrero that Matthysse could be an opponent if they can make a case for it. And I think even though this fight was a pound over the light welterweight limit, we did explain that in the podcast. It never was. Even though the fight was made at 141 pound catch weight, this fight Matthysse showed that he had that much power that it would be worth putting him in at welterweight against Mayweather, in my opinion.
Yeah, and also he's not afraid to. I think with Mayweather, as we've said before, is that you let Mayweather, you think too much with Mayweather, you let him dictate and you've got no chance. Matthysse, you've got to pressure Mayweather, you've got to, whether Matthysse would have, I think my doubts with Matthyisse's chances against Mayweather was whether he would be able to revert to a plan B, a plan C when plan A wasn't working. But certainly he's one of the few guys now that the boxing public would be fascinated to see. I think I said myself a few weeks ago, there isn't anybody in and around the division that Mayweather was likely to face that I would think would be that appealing. Well, his performance against Peterson has certainly changed my mind on that.
Yeah, I think that I just want to, in closing, just look at the 2 knockdowns, really. The first knockdown was almost like a cuffing left hook, wasn't it? Yeah. And I mean, it was astonishing. It reminded me of a quote from Vinny Pazienza, who once, I can't remember who it was fighting. It was probably, who was it he had the rivalry with? Was it
Greg Haugen?
Might have been, but I think there was a rivalry.
Camacho?
No, it was another East Coast guy. I'm sure it'll come to me in a minute. But he hurt his rival, and he said his legs went to spaghetti, and I was all over him like the sauce. And I mean, Peterson's legs certainly went to spaghetti, didn't they?
Yeah, they really did. Yeah. Wasn't quite the spaghetti legs of Trevor Berbick against Mike Tyson in 1986, but yeah, he was devastating power.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of just getting over a knee injury, as you know, carrying the war wound. But it's sort of the way he fell seemed to be one of those ways where you could actually do harm to your legs because it sort of just swayed underneath.
Yeah.
It was a very awkward fall, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
But he got up, and I definitely won't say unfazed because he looked a little bit cloudy when he was listening to Steve Smoger's instructions. But then in the third round, there was that second knockdown where they shaped up right close to each other and they went to swap left hooks. Matthysse landed first, and bang! I mean, it was pretty much lights out, wasn't it?
Yeah, and that's it was the kind of closer that boxing fans You know, we enjoy. Perhaps sometimes we feel a little bit guilty about that, but that is the kind of punch that what makes boxing special to so many of us.
Because you and I are probably ringside for, I don't know, maybe 20 shows a year. Maybe about 20 shows a year, and you'd be lucky to get 2 of those a year, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
2 shots like that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think people that kind of dip in and out of boxing, or they're lucky enough for their first experience to witness something like that, they're surprised. I know certain guys I'll speak to, they're surprised when I tell them how many fights actually go the distance. You know, boxing isn't just right. Okay, let's walk in. All right, you knocked him out. It's very rare that you'll see something like that.
Yeah. Let's just also give referee Steve Smoger a little bit of credit, because I know everyone was looking forward to Peterson Matisse, but no one obviously wanted either fighter to get hurt. And although Peterson went down like a sack of spuds straight onto his back in that third round for the second knockdown, Smoger gave him a chance to fight on.
Yeah.
And Peterson's legs weren't properly under him, and he went down again. And so Smoger didn't even need to check. Did he? Sort of given him the slight benefit of the doubt, and you know, with the way things work, he didn't have to take another clean shot, and Smoger interjected. So Smoger, in fact, when I tweeted the officials for Froch Kessler, which you can find on our website, by the way, I had a number of people comment saying, "I wish it was Steve Smoger." You know, because he's known to let things go. But he also seems to make the stoppages at the right time.
I like Steve Smoger. He's taken some stick over the years, and he has made. You know, there's a few fights where you could argue he stepped in late. Well, there's a few fights he definitely has stepped in too late. And people have said, "Oh, he hasn't got the fighter's interests at heart." But he certainly seems to have boxing at heart.
Dana Rosenblatt.
Yeah.
That's what I meant for Vinny Pazienza's rival, who's also from Massachusetts. I think the quote was about him anyway, but it was a great line, typical Pazienza. I remember when I used to train in the Catskills in New York, because he was up there with Kevin Rooney. Paz there was a quote about him, you know, where he said something. It's something that you wouldn't want the mainstream journalists to take literally, but is he prepared to die in that ring? Because I'm prepared to die every time I step through the ropes. And that was on a big canvas, or sort of almost like tarpaulin along the side of the ropes. It's kind of a message for how hard things could get in that Catskill gym. I think I've probably still got half a concussion to show for it. So anyway, on another note, it's been nice to catch up, Matt. It's a shame that Fridays was unaired and that people didn't get round 6 or 7 on Purdy or rounds 1 to 4 on Matisse. Yeah. We'll hopefully make amends with your cheeky fivers this week. As I mentioned, we'll be ringside at the O2. Matt and myself will be doing live updates via the website. We'll both be on our Twitter handles as well, no doubt. Probably retweeting each other like it's going out of fashion. And then we'll be back next week, where we'll be catching up with all of the fallout from Froch Kessler, looking ahead to Martin Gethin's audacious attempt at Ahmet Diaz, and I think that's about it. We've obviously in just as an aside, Thomas Chabasi, one of our top freelancers in the US, he's written a cracking feature with Michael Buffer coming up in next week's issue. I've spoken to Michael Buffer this week, and so the people who download the app will be able to see both, but the video will be going up on the website, so keep an eye out for that, because Buffer's a really good guy who's been around the sport a long time, and he's had a lot of his own battles as well, so it's some really interesting stuff. But in the meantime, Matt, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.
And I'll see you on Saturday night, and I'll see you guys next week. So thanks a lot.
Get involved with all the best boxing banter at our forum, and that's forum.boxingnewsonline.net.